In any organization, there may be threats and risks that the cybersecurity team may not have imagined. CyCognito helps organizations uncover and eliminate critical security risks that they are often unaware of. With an award-winning team and intelligence agency expertise, CyCognito utilizes its keen understanding of hacker techniques to help organizations stay protected 24/7. And we are fortunate to have here today as one of our speakers, the CEO and co-founder of CyCognito, Mr. Rob Gurzeev. He has led the development of offensive security solutions for both the private sector and intelligence agencies. Prior to founding CyCognito, he was Director of Offensive Security and Head of R&D at C4 Security, and the CTO of the product department of the 8,200 Israeli Intelligence Corps.
Hi, I'm Rob Gurzeev, CEO and co-founder of CyCognito, and I would love to share with you how we see attack surface protection, how we help Fortune 500 companies and others to eliminate shadow risk and focus on the few security gaps that truly create 90% of their cyber risk, and how you can prevent breaches by looking at your IT ecosystem as attackers do versus stopping the breaches after they already happen and some of the damage is done. So about a third of our company served for years in the NSA here in the US and in the 8200 unit in Israel. And I personally led the reconnaissance department of the 8200 unit for a number of years. And when you have targets like ISIS and Boko Haram and Al-Qaeda, and you need to find a path of least resistance into the relevant stuff from which you can acquire the relevant intelligence, you have to start from mapping the organization's attack surfaces, finding their affiliates, understanding their org structure. And when you find a path of least resistance, you have to understand what this asset is so you can target on 3 or 5 things, obviously, and not thousands. So that's how prioritization works for attackers when they look at organizations' attack surfaces. And the path of least resistance always directs attackers towards the least monitored and the least protected assets. So that's how attackers do it. Now, the cybersecurity industry, on the other hand, for 25 years, built dozens of siloed tools that require massive amount of manual work just to find your subsidiaries' assets and your cloud environments and gateways and routers you might not be aware of, and finding the tens of thousands of web interfaces you have. And then running security testing is incredibly inefficient today, where even if you're using a Veracode or Fortify or a White Hat security, it might be monitoring 5 or 10 or 20 web applications out of the tens of thousands that large enterprises have. And the result is a complete misalignment between what attackers are seeing and what defenders are seeing and protecting. So when we started the company a few years ago, we said that contrast is why we were successful in our previous lives, but let's try to automate what attackers do to help security teams be much more successful at preventing breaches, but also become massively more efficient and save hundreds of hours every month and hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes significantly more, on attack surface protection. So some of the first things we learned were, according to Gartner, over 50% of the breaches are attributed to unknown and unmanaged assets. And then according to ESG, security leaders believe that the vast majority of the attacks target unknown and unmanaged assets. and they believe that 75% of their organizations are going to be continuously attacked at unknown and unmanaged assets. So if you take into account that organizations see just half of their IT ecosystem for various reasons, and then thorough security testing is done on maybe 1 or 2% of the attack surface, of course, by applying basic logic, attackers are going to target these areas and acquire access to networks and data through those paths of least resistance and these blind spots. The interesting thing is that all of these legacy solutions, where their data models and approach were really designed in the late 90s, and some of these technologies were built too in the late 90s, or in the best case scenario, 10, 12 years ago. What they're looking at is really just the tip of the iceberg. They're all only looking at IP addresses and URLs and ports and CPEs. And what they're not looking at is the context and the meaning and the actual exposure of these assets, which is what attackers are looking for. That's what attackers find, and how attackers exploit and breach organizations again and again, even when these organizations spend millions on these legacy technologies. So for example, if you have a third-party payment mechanism that has an SQLI vulnerability that exposes your customers' financial data, how important is that to you as a CISO or to your CEO if that's exposing your customers' financial data? From 1 to 10, probably a 10. If you have a MySQL database or a MongoDB or a Jira instance that is misconfigured and is accidentally exposing your customers' API keys or other PII, how important is that from 1 to 10? Or if you have a network architecture flaw exposing critical OT and IT systems and allowing attackers to become admins in your network, how important is that from 1 to 10? But the problem is that these legacy technologies are not built and cannot tell you those things, and definitely not at scale. That's only human labor and tons of it that you would have to do, and you cannot really do at more than 1% level. So what we're going to do over the next few minutes is talk about some examples of breaches CyCognito has prevented using our SaaS platform, and then we'll talk about what the general approach should be and how we can help you. So for example, some very common things we're seeing are internal SaaS instances or cloud instances that have some of the most sensitive information of the company, like these Confluence instance of Fortune 500 companies where you sometimes even have Okta, but it's misconfigured, and it allows attackers to directly access some of the company's most sensitive information. So are you compliant? Yes. Are you using the best solution maybe for identity management in Okta? Yes. But if it's misconfigured and some of your most sensitive data is exposed, is that good enough? Or is that a potential breach just waiting for attackers to find that information? Another type of breaches we often prevent and see many such attack vectors is routers and gateways that security teams are not even aware of in some offices or some departments and subsidiaries that you might not have access to. But the smallest misconfiguration, and sometimes just bad patching cadence, can allow attackers to become admins in those networks. By the way, through automating pen testing We have even found zero-day vulnerabilities in Cisco ASAs and gateways that their pen testers and automated DAST solutions have not found. And this example is one of my favorites. So just a few days, interestingly enough, after the Colonial Pipeline breach in the US, our system has found this OT system in this Fortune 100 company that is even bigger than Colonial Pipeline. And this would allow attackers to take over this OT system. We can see one of the OT systems deployed in that network. And that could have been worse than the Colonial Pipeline case. So the question is, once you see these things, it's obvious you need to do something about it and change the configuration of this firewall or patch this system or just eliminate this old router or change the configuration of Okta on that Confluence server. The question is, who could tell you today continuously what you don't know about, but is actually exposed to attackers and can allow attackers to exploit it and breach the organization? So at CyCognito, we have built a SaaS platform, and it took us years and tens of millions of dollars to build. But we have built a SaaS platform that serves almost 10% of the Fortune 100 companies and about 10% of the Fortune 500 companies that helps them in three main areas. One, we increased their attack surface visibility by 30 to 300%, even if they were using attack surface management or security ratings solutions before. Two, and we are super proud of our ability to massively reduce the amount of noise that you have to deal with today, where the Qualises of the world bombard you with thousands of allegedly severe vulnerabilities. And we reduce that number to 5 or 10 or 30 that are actually exploitable and are related to critical assets. And everything we do, by the way, just like attackers, we do completely externally, automatically, with no configuration and no effort required on your side, just like attackers and unlike all of these legacy technologies that were designed in the late 90s. And then the proof point for everything I just shared is we also help our customers to massively reduce their time to remediation from many months to just a couple of weeks, and sometimes significantly less. And since we have vertically integrated all of these processes into a single SaaS platform, we do all of this while also saving our customers hundreds of hours every month and hundreds of thousands of dollars in pen testing and compliance costs and other human labor related costs. So to summarize, attackers breach organizations primarily by targeting unknown and unmanaged assets and by exploiting the areas in your IT ecosystem that you cannot see or you can't properly monitor, especially using legacy technologies. And the only solution to that is to leverage the attacker's methodologies and technologies to find these networks and cloud environments and third-party assets that affect your security posture, and to leverage the attack surface and asset business context, along with exploitability, to prioritize and find the 5 or 10 paths of least resistance and focus on these. If you'd like to prevent such breaches related to unknown and unmanaged assets, or to massively improve your vulnerability and external risk prioritization capabilities, we would love to talk to you. Feel free to reach out to me or to go to our website and ask for a demo, and we would love to talk to you. Thank you.